Hello and good evening to all of our viewers, all of our listeners. Welcome to another Keep Six event, specifically tonight geared to systemic issues in corrections, part 1. My name is Jacqueline Dixon, and I'm going to be your moderator tonight. And we're going to be having a very important, frank, but friendly discussion centered around the Canadian criminal justice system. And my role as moderator tonight is not to control or influence the discussion, but rather to provide yet an open, comfortable atmosphere for a constructive discussion. The goal tonight is to identify issues that negatively affect Black and or marginalized communities as a result of being involved with our criminal justice system. The outcome from tonight's event is to provide solutions in the form of recommendations and suggestions for the implementation of policies and procedures that can affect change. We will be talking about specific issues pertaining to, but not limited to, the following: systemic racism within our correctional institutions and the systems that govern it. This segment will be led by Renu Kulendran, a member of the Ministry of Solicitor General of Ontario. More details to follow. In segment 2, we will address the need for more diversity and representation within law enforcement and the issues that prevent that from happening. This segment will be led by Jacqueline Edwards, president of ABLE. More information to follow. Segment 3 will deal with the alarming rise in the number of crimes followed by incarceration of our Black youth within the community. This segment will be led by Mr. David Mitchell, another member of the Ministry of the Solicitor General of Ontario. In segment 4, we have the Black experience. What does it mean to be Black in Canada? Can your socioeconomic situation, your education, or postal code play any role in your personal experiences when you are Black in Canada? This segment will be led by Spider Jones. We also have another esteemed panel member with us this evening, which is Jordana Goldlist, a criminal defense lawyer and supporter for the Keep Six organization. Let me take a quick moment out to introduce myself. My name is Jacqueline Dixon, and I'm president and CEO with New Era Communications. I also act as vice president for GBKM TV. GBKM TV is a 24-hour web radio station operating in the GTA, specializing to issues dealing specifically with Afro-Caribbean community. As a CSP, which is a certified sales professional, I train and speak to sales professionals and entrepreneurs for a living. I also, as a professional speaker, speak on issues that pertain to empowerment of women and the upliftment of women of color within the Canadian society. My hope today, as a professional speaker, I am qualified through the organization of CAPS, which is the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. My hope today is to be able to provide you with a constructive conversation. We encourage you to take part in what we believe will be a very organic conversation on the various different issues that we are about to address. Before starting our panel today, we would like to give recognition to the organizers of Keep Six and provide you with the mission statement that they have embraced since starting this journey. Keep Six's mission statement is threefold. At Keep Six, the mission statement is to provide holistic and integrated capacity building programs for justice system involved youth. Secondly, they are preventing first-time young offenders from going down a disempowering path by providing one-on-one mentoring, career counseling, and employment skills training. And thirdly, promoting healthy self-esteem by providing counseling for youth and core life skills such as communication, interpersonal, and leadership skills to make healthy life decisions. The founder of Keep Six, Mr. Richard Miller, will be introduced before the end of tonight's event. Before we proceed, let us acknowledge the land in which we are taking part in, where this discussion is taking part. In order for the land acknowledgement, of course, not to sound tokenistic, it is important for me to situate myself and recognize myself as a racialized settler occupying Indigenous land. I'm speaking about the importance and recognition of the work that needs to be done for the Indigenous and decolonized individuals in every aspect of our life. We also recognize and want to give appreciation to our Black ancestors who also guide us and walked the land. Thank you for that. Now, I want to also recognize a guest that we have tonight. And the guest that we have tonight is joining us as a result of a most recent tragedy affecting the mistreatment of Black lives by the hands of law enforcement, resulting in the paralyzation of an individual by the name of Jacob Blake. As a result of that, as a result of being shot 8 times in the back, the Keep Six organization has invited Jasmine Headley, a 7-year-old grade 3 student that decided to start singing since the age of 4. Since the death of George Floyd, that inspired her to write a song by the name of George Floyd. We invite Jasmine Headley, a grade 3 student, to perform that song for us tonight before we get started. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Hi. Ooh, George Floyd. Ooh, George Floyd. Grew up in a town called Minneapolis, and he worked so hard. His life was stolen, but not in vain. He will always be remembered for his kind ways. Laughing, talking, and enjoying your own ways. Even though it ain't all it seems, you got a pocket full of dreams. Let's breathe for George Floyd. We will all come together for you, fight to see justice come true. Let's breathe for George Floyd. We will always stand proud for you. George Floyd, George Floyd, George Floyd. Wishing you were alive and here with us today. And talking and enjoying your old ways. Always remembering the peaceful road you paved. Keeping our hearts, our hopeful dreams locked and safe. Even though it ain't all it seems, you got a pocket full of dreams. Let's breathe for George Floyd. We will all come together for you, George Floyd. We will always stand proud for you, fight to see justice come through. Let's breathe for George Floyd, George Floyd, George Floyd.
Yes.
Thank you.
powerful. Congratulations. Congratulations, Jasmine. We can see that you've got a powerful and long, successful career ahead of you. To see you again in some future broadcasts. Have a great night. Thank you, Dad.
Bye.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Once again, welcome everybody to tonight's broadcast for the Keep Six production of systemic issues within the corrections, part 1, and hosted by the Keep Six organization, moderated by myself, Jacqueline Dixon. We're going to jump right into it, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to jump right into it, and we're going to jump into segment number 1. Segment number 1 is going to be led by Renu Kulendran. And I want to tell you a little bit about Renu Kulendran's post that she holds, and prior to turning over the microphone to her to further elaborate about her position and responsibilities. So Renu Kulendran is the Acting Deputy Solicitor General for Correctional Services, Ministry of the Solicitor General. And she deals with the adult offenders. The Correctional Services is responsible for maintaining and operating provincial correctional institutions for adult offenders 18 years and over who are serving a sentence of up to 2 years less a day, or who are awaiting criminal proceedings. This ministry is also responsible for the community supervision of persons on probation, conditional sentences, and provincial parole. Welcome, Renu Kulendran. Thank you so much for joining us tonight as an esteemed member of the panel. Please elaborate any further in regards to your responsibilities for the viewers.
Sure. I'm just looking at the expression on David's face because he's wondering when I became Deputy Solicitor General. I'm actually acting for my boss, Deborah Richardson, who wanted to be here and is the Deputy Solicitor General responsible for all of corrections. I am the Assistant Deputy Minister that's responsible for the Community Services Program, which is the adult probation and parole program, and work very closely with my colleague David Mitchell, who's responsible for the Youth Justice Program. I am really delighted to be here. I think I'm delighted that this is the topic of discussion, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the panel and from participants about what your thoughts and concerns are. But maybe Jacqueline, I can start with a little bit of an overview of the correctional system in Ontario, and I think just jump right in to talk about how the broader sort of criminal justice and as well in corrections, just how many people identify as Black and recognize that there is overrepresentation compared to what is the percentage of the population that identifies as Black in Ontario. So I'm at your disposal if you just want me to provide a little bit of an overview.
Okay, please do give us a bit of an overview. We do have some specific questions specific to the department that you are in and the responsibilities that you hold. Okay. And I certainly apologize. My information tells me that you're the acting solicitor general. So if I forgot the word acting, my apologies.
No problem. Yeah.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. Thank you so much. But please go ahead with the overview.
Sure. There are about 25 provincial correctional facilities. As you mentioned, we tend to look after those inmates that have sentences of 2 years less a day. But we have a lot of inmates who are on remand in our system. So that means they're awaiting sentencing by the courts. They're awaiting, disposition. And so at any time, that can be 70% of the people in our institutions. On the probation and parole side, we supervise about 40,000 clients in the communities across the province, and deliver those programs through about 119 regional offices, satellite offices, and remote reporting centers. So there are certainly a lot of people that are in our care and custody.
Wow. Okay. So your hands are full. You've got a big responsibility. You operate from the provincial level. And for those who are not as familiar as yourself or the organizers with the Keep Six organization as to the balance of power where corrections are concerned within Canada, maybe you could elaborate on that or touch on that just a bit for us, because my understanding is that we do not tonight have anybody representing Corrections Canada, which would be the federal representatives. And but you do represent on a provincial level the organization or the institution itself.
That's right, and that's not to say that we don't work closely with our federal counterparts, but we, and of course the federal government is responsible more broadly for the criminal code. They are the ones who are the lawmakers around the criminal code. So we do need to work very closely with our federal counterparts and also our counterparts in the courts and police services across the justice sector. Just as I described earlier, there are those, the inmates that are serving longer terms tend to serve in federal institutions. And so we have the challenge of having inmates for a shorter period of time typically. And if they are on remand and not sentenced by the courts and we have them, there is, a limited amount that we can do with respect to programming and training, but we are trying to do more in that regard. So that is sort of one of the challenges that we face in terms of the population that we serve.
Okay, thank you for that. So one of the things that I noticed that you identified very quickly when you took the microphone is that you identified the fact that you deal with adult offenders that are serving sentences of less than 2 years. So at the point where 2 years less a day, I think was the term that you used, but so individuals that are serving sentences of 2 years or more, they would be in federal custody. Am I correct?
That's correct. But we also have a significant population, and that's the remanded population that have not been sentenced. So we may have them for more significant periods of time until their matters are disposed of by the courts in terms of actual sentences. So, but generally speaking, for those sentenced individuals, we will have those individuals in place in our facilities for a shorter period of time. However, through our community services program, if there's court-ordered supervision through probation and parole, then we do have, responsibility for, and also if individuals are paroled by the Ontario Parole Board, we do have a responsibility for supporting those individuals through, through supervision, through programming, and to help them transition back into the community. And there's a lot of work that we are starting to do more of with respect to community reintegration and how we do that with the support and involvement of community organizations. And I really see that as an opportunity that, certainly we can work with not only Keep Six, but more racialized community organizations to help inform that transition, particularly with respect to Black and racialized inmates and offenders.
Thank you so much for that. And we're going to come back to that because that's a very important topic, because it seems that your department spends a lot of time working with individuals that are already in the community, not necessarily incarcerated, and helping them to reintegrate into the community, to ensure that they're not reoffending and that they do have an opportunity to live a long and productive life. One of the things that your department in its definition of the duties and responsibilities that you hold claim is that you provide effective supervision and the provisions of services and for culturally sensitive programming to adult offenders serving community-based sentences. That's a tall order. And I'd like you to just delve into that a little bit, because if you can give us an example of or scenario of one or more culturally sensitive programs that you have either initiated, founded, or suggested, and what the outcome of that was or is for our offenders that are in the community today?
Okay, so I think there are, so I can talk about both in institutions, within institutions and in the community, because there's often that continuum and connection. So certainly, one of the things that we are doing as an example at Toronto, South and Detention Center, which is in Mimico, and Toronto East Detention Center, are programs that are specifically designed to help support a Black inmate. So there's, for example, there's a program called African Canadian Excellence, or ACE, and which was piloted last year and was developed as a 6-session life skills education program to address the unique needs of Black inmates in institutions in the community. And we know that we had about 80 people in the pilot, and we're hoping to evaluate the results from the pilot and offer training to a larger group of facilitators so this can be expanded to other institutions. But the program was developed in consultation, I believe, with community organizations, and with a specific perspective of the African Canadian experience as part of the programming and information, and I believe also it was part of that included focus groups as well with Black inmates. There is a program at Toronto East Detention Center called Change is a Choice, which is a kind of orientation program that offers an intensive and culturally informed programming around things like anger management, substance abuse, some cognitive behavioral therapy to help address some to address criminal thinking and criminal thinking patterns, and also is about supporting healthy relationships, whether that's with a partner, spouse, family. And so within the context of that particular program, there is an effort to ensure that those services are offered to Black and racialized inmates and offenders that are facilitated by Black and racialized staff. And that includes, the program includes instructors in probation and parole, rehabilitation staff, and social workers. So those are a couple of examples that transitioned into community and that involved our probation and parole staff. I would say that, representation matters, and we are doing more to ensure that the service providers, our probation and parole officers, our correctional officers, look more like the people that they serve. So that means in terms of doing more intentional work around recruitment and retention of staff who have experience, a lived experience or broader experience. And it's something that we are trying to advance, not only through our internal employee network that is which is CURE, which is the Correctional Union of Racialized Employees, but also we're hoping, and I know that the Jacqueline Edwards is on the panel, to do more work with ABLE in that regard.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that very specific information. And just to follow up to the information that you shared, has there been any statistical data to indicate that these programs that have been implemented are effective? Are we seeing a reduction in the amount of repeat offenders coming back? Are we seeing that these individuals who are taking part in these, you mentioned a number of 80, so you currently have about 80 participants in one of the programs that are being administered. Are we seeing the outcome that we or your organization had planned for in any way?
Yeah, I think because one of the programs is certainly just launched last year. I think we're still evaluating the results, but I think that programming is just one aspect of what we need to do to help support that community reintegration, which, is much, much broader. And I would say, our population in the community program has changed. We have more and more offenders in the community who have complex challenges, mental health, addiction, housing. So that success really is not only about programming, but about what we can do to help connect those inmates that are leaving our institutions to supports in the community that can help them be successful. And whether that's, that's employment, programming, housing support, medical and other mental health supports. And that's where I see that there's real opportunity in terms of, looking at which community organizations we are partnering with, and what we can do more to be more specifically culturally competent in this regard, but for Black, racialized, Indigenous offenders in particular, and working with organizations that can help us support the transition. So I think that's when we can see, how it's not just one piece of the puzzle. It's really what does that whole picture looks like. And I would say another, thing that's going to help support us is the ability to collect data. And you may be aware that in our anti-racism directorate, which is led by my colleague, Nosa Eros-Brown, we are starting to, and the work that you're doing across government, not just at our ministry, but across government, we are starting to look at collecting data, not in the justice sector, in education, in child welfare, that's race-based. And we're hoping, and as an example, as part of this, my community safety counterparts in the Ministry of Solicitor General are going to be collecting, data on race and police use of force reports, and to see what, if there's a correlation, if there's a high representation of Black or racialized employees as part of that data. And that data will really help us inform not only policy development, but program development, and help us understand, where we might be doing well and where our gaps are.
Thank you so much for that. I have some questions that are coming in now from the community. And just before we turn to them, while we're still in your segment, I encourage the other panel members to please participate as well if you feel that you'd like to lend some conversation or comment to what Renu is saying based on your either affiliation with her or her organization, then please feel free to do so. So the question that I have now is, how many inmates within the provincial prisons identify as Black? Are you carrying statistics such as that? Specifically Black?
Yeah, so based on the data we have, and I think that our ability to, as of October 1 to collect more granular race-based data, we have about 6,126 inmates total. Of that, about 18.5% identify as Black, and that's roughly about 1,100 and change, I think, and that's pretty astonishing, given that in Ontario, I think just under 5% of the population identifies as Black. So we know that there is overrepresentation, and we want to understand why. And I think having, more data, there's been a lot of work done by academics, but it is something that we recognize is a big challenge for us in the justice system and in corrections in particular.
So with an 18% representation, is it fair to say that Blacks represent the highest percentage of incarcerated individuals in the adult system right now?
So, when we talk in terms of overrepresentation compared to the Ontario population, because
not in relation to the population, because we know that there's no correlation with the population in Ontario and the number of incarcerated individuals, because the population in Ontario, as you've just stated, is only about 5%, but yet still in the incarcerated number is 18%. So there's no correlation there. But the overall number of individuals that are incarcerated, period, from that number, Blacks, as you've just mentioned, in the adult system represent 18%. Yeah. Is that the highest representation of a community within the correctional facilities of Ontario?
No, I think most inmates, and part of this data is self-identification as well. So there's still, there's still more white inmates. There's similar overrepresentation, not in terms of the same numbers, but with respect to Indigenous inmates. So I would characterize it as it's a significant challenge when you compare that to the population, the Black population in Ontario. But in terms of I guess if you're talking about
overall numbers,
racial overall numbers, no, but in terms of racialized and Indigenous populations in the institution, is pretty significant.
Yes, it definitely is. Yeah. And another question coming from one of the panel members is, in your experience, are you aware of inmates being disproportionately reprimanded or disciplined within the correctional institutions? And these inmates that they're speaking about are specifically inmates of color, most likely Black or Indigenous.
That is a good question. I would say that we certainly do, and I also caveat, this is not my area in terms of the institutional pieces, but we do track, we do look at complaints not only from inmates but also from staff within institutions. And we do have, processes in place to track incidents of workplace discrimination, harassment, etc. So I'm not aware of a disproportionality with respect to discipline or some of these other issues, but it is something that I think as we look at how we. And I can talk a little bit about what we're doing differently in terms of how we train staff and hire staff. It may have been something that is a historical issue. We just recently revamped our correctional officer training program with a greater focus on human rights and mental health training. So equipping our staff in the institution with with more context and understanding and sort of and teamwork skills in terms of how to work with inmates in a way that is more about understanding the context of the situation as opposed to historically what might have been involved in the training.
Okay, thank you so much. The floor is open to any panel member and viewer that has any questions. I do have a question from one of the viewers right now that is specifically for you, Renu.
Okay.
And I'll just read it. So the question is, are these programs that are offered to all individuals who are incarcerated, pre-trial detainees and sentenced as well? Or are they only for those who have been sentenced?
Yeah, so that is a big challenge for us, because when we have inmates that have been sentenced, we have a greater ability to get them involved in programming. When they're awaiting disposition by the courts, a lot of the things we can do are really just voluntary, other than things that we can do to help support them from a mental health and addiction perspective. But I think that certainly the provincial auditor and others have recognized that we need to do more for that remand population. So there is active work on seeing what we can do. I mean, part of the challenge is sometimes we only have people for a few days or a couple of weeks. And with respect to programming, there is not a lot you can do in a couple of days. However, we're taking a look at that discharge planning process to say, okay, what kinds of things that can we seed, that we can provide some basic supports around, so that when that transition happens, that at least that person is equipped with some form of training or programming. There are lots of things and partnerships. I think that there was a question, before we had the session, that came forward that was around, are there opportunities to work with post-secondary institutions similar to the Walls to Bridges programs that are operating in the States? And in fact, there are a number of partnerships with Ontario universities to help support that education. There's an ability to help support someone get their GED or help them into college and university programs. There are a lot more flexibility, but again, it's very challenging when particularly if an offender is an inmate is in a remand situation, sometimes even knowing how long you have that individual. So I think part of the challenge for us is, what can we do that's customizable, that's culturally appropriate in the window of time, and then how can we work better with community organizations and service providers to at least provide information and support around that transition.
Thank you. Another question coming from one of our viewers, very, very powerful question. How is the Solicitor General's office planning on handling the over 6,000 complaints with the Ombudsman's office from folks inside of our provincial jail? So the inmates, the people that are currently incarcerated, have in excess of 6,000 complaints that they've lodged against the officers or the treatment or the system itself. And how does your office, alongside of the Ombudsman's office, plan on handling these in a timely manner at that too?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say something that we've started, so I've been with the ministry since last October. Certainly since I've been with the ministry, my colleague on the institutional side, Daryl Petfield, and myself, as well as another senior official from the ministry, have biweekly calls with Ombudsman's office staff, in which we do try to provide an update on issues. They ask us very tough questions, and we share information about the complaints, and the complaints can range from complaints about food, about access to families in terms of communications, which has been very challenging during COVID. There's a lot that the institutions have done to create safer environments for inmates. during COVID, but that has meant that we only recently just started resuming visitation programs for inmates and staff. So I would say, to the viewer, it's a very good question, and how we address those issues is by actually sitting down with the Ombudsman's office and going through those complaints on a regular basis, and to see what we can do to get better communication out to inmates and organizations, and how we can address some of these issues that way, maybe more systematic in terms of that, that access to communication, or sometimes they're individual complaints. So that's the process that we've been starting to use to try to expedite and to address these concerns.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So we're going to conclude your segment, but we encourage you to stay on with us. You provided some very valuable information. I'm definitely sure that we could have chatted with you all evening. Can we conclude your segment by saying that these complaints are being dealt with, that they are being dealt with, and that a resolution to each and every single one will eventually be done here, that the individuals that are filing these complaints aren't just filing these complaints for no reason, that they can look forward to getting a resolve at some point, or a decision, a conclusion to them at some point in time.
Yeah, and I would just say, I know that there are a number of questions on the chat, and I'm happy to try to provide responses for them offline, because I know I didn't necessarily answer all of them, but certainly happy to follow up if it's helpful.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for tuning in today to the program brought to you by the organizers of Keep Six. And the discussion tonight is about systemic issues involving race within the correctional institution, part 1. In segment 2 now, we're about to bring on a lady that I had the great privilege of being introduced to last week. She is Jacqueline Edwards, and she is the president of the Association of Black Law Enforcers, and it goes by an acronym of ABLE, which is ABLE. I absolutely love it. And I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis as to what her organization does, and then she will take it from here. So, understanding the profound concept of unity, several brave and astute Black officers working in the criminal justice system formed a collective body to address a number of inequities and injustices that were pervasive in the system during the 1990s and beyond. This led to the formation of the Association of Black Law Enforcers, otherwise known as ABLE, in 1992, with an aim to improve the image of law enforcement within the community. Welcome, Jacqueline Edwards, as a distinguished panel member. Please share with us or elaborate further on your position with ABLE and the objectives of your organization.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Dixon. I, like others, will refer to you as Jacqueline moving forward. It really is a pleasure. Not feeling the greatest, as I mentioned at the onset of our call here, but will do my best to push through. As you note, ABLE, the Association of Black Law Enforcers, I am its 6th president. Actually, Mr. David Mitchell was our first president of ABLE, as well as one of many of the founding members. He was very instrumental in the creation of ABLE. And when I first met David, it was actually as a result of having received ABLE's first scholarship. Way back when, I won't say when, but it was in the 1993. So ABLE is more than just a title in terms of its president for me. ABLE has provided, I'm a product of ABLE. Before I got started in my own career path, ABLE was very, very instrumental in providing me with the necessary support, providing me with role models that looked like me, role models that understood the importance of having Black and other racialized people pursue careers in and within the justice system. So I am here tonight, on several different levels, but part of what one of the things I would like to share is that, as members of the law enforcement community and racialized individual, ABLE's members sit at the intersection of these two worlds, and therefore we're uniquely positioned to provide insight into meaningful reform. We try to, we relate. We are people of color, we are Black, we are racialized, and we're also working within a system that is causing great concerns for people. And so having to sort of tread in both of those worlds at times can be very, very challenging. One of the points of emphasis that I wanted to make tonight is that our members, we are parole officers, correctional officers, police officers, every aspect of the justice system. Our membership comes from those various professions. And what is, again, unique about us is that we don't just relate. We understand. We are subject also to some of the anti-racist mindsets, anti-Black racist mindsets. We are subject also to environments that are not always conducive to the well-being and healthiness that we're all striving for. So again, my sort of encouragement in being here tonight is for more people that look like myself, more persons of colors, more Black and racialized to pursue careers in law enforcement and within the justice system, pursue careers so that you can, in fact, be a part of the solution and be able to relate and have those individuals, whether inmates, offenders, or whomever. I think we bring a perspective and a cultural competency that helps rather than hinder. I think we bring a relatability to the different professions within this field that makes, in my humble opinion, and I think representing our members, that makes the profession that much better and makes it that much better to meet its objectives and to achieve some of the goals. So I'll stop there, Jacqueline, because I think that's what you'd asked us to do, sort of a brief overview.
Right.
And I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Awesome. Good stuff. Listen, first of all, I just want to say kudos to you. When I started reading about this organization, I couldn't stop reading. I was totally enthralled. I had no idea. I consider myself a reasonably intelligent, active member of the community, and yet still I knew nothing about this organization. I didn't know that it existed, and I'm so absolutely thrilled that you are a part of this panel tonight, because I pulled a whole bunch of research out there about the very topics of concern that your organization is created to address. And I want to talk about a few of them with you, but I want to delve into two statements that you've made on your website, which better explain a little bit more about your organization. So one of the things that it says is that we engage in social issues relating to race, discrimination in the workplace, and general encounters and experiences of unfairness. So what I'm taking from that, Jacqueline, is that regardless of the fact that you are a police officer, you are a law enforcement, you are a probation officer, you are working within the correctional institutions as a jail guard, you yourself, even though that you're holding those positions of power, still have experiences of racism, discrimination, and unfairness within the workplace. So you're dealing with your own kind of microcosm issues within the institutions themselves outside of the general society that people like myself and maybe Spider, because we're the only lay people in this group tonight, right? Experience. So is this a prevalent issue? How big of an issue is this for our law enforcement officers of color on a day-to-day basis?
It absolutely is an issue, and I think for me to say any different would not be true. Racism, all the isms exist within society. They do not check at the front gates of the jails. They do not check at the front gates of any institution. So it does exist because racism is a part of the Canadian society. And so the mindsets that exist outside of the walls of our institutions often exist or carry themselves inside. The difference, I believe, is that as an association, what we do is we identify those concerns, and we're not afraid to identify those concerns because we're on that side of the wall, if you will. As Renu mentioned earlier, we actually had the need to engage the Deputy Solicitor General on some issues of concerns that was raised by members around allegations of racism, allegations of unfair treatment. We do get that from a broad spectrum across the justice system. And what we do with those pieces of information, what we do with those concerns is that we raise them locally, regionally, and nationally, because as I mentioned earlier, ABLE was formed because of the issues of concerns that law enforcement practitioners were facing, not outside the community as motorists or pedestrians or citizens at large, but as serving justice practitioners. That is why ABLE was actually created. So Jacqueline, absolutely. And 29 years later, as I would suggest that because of ABLE, because of the engagements, the interactions, the vocal statements and the positions that we've made and taken, we have seen some progress. We do see a change for the better, but there is so much work still to be done. Representation in terms at senior levels are still an issue. They're still an issue. We are, in fact, represented at the entry level, maybe 2, maybe 3 ranks beyond entry level. But if you were to take a snapshot of the senior executives within our various professions and the industry, it's quite shameful, because it's not as though we, in terms of Blacks and other racialized minorities, aren't available to assume to be in those positions. So there's still those barriers. There's still the tap on the shoulder mode of hiring versus looking at who is best suited, if you will. There is, I think Renu mentioned earlier that the intent in hiring is to ensure that those hired reflects the diversity that we're in charge and entrusted to serve and to protect and to provide means of reintegration back into the community, but we've got a long, long ways to go. There's a need for us to go from just not recruitment, but also retention and indeed succession, and how you value diversity is in fact ensuring that those the diversity that you valued at the recruitment stage is reflected at all different levels within your organization. And the one and done, or, we have a handful, so we're good, has to change. It needs to change. And ABLE is continuously raising those concerns. One of the pride that I have in being a part of this organization is that our members are in fact walking that, as I said, that dual path, if you will. All of what's happening lately, in the States and right here in our own backyard has put a real a negative lens on our professions. And what we are doing as an association is continuously engaging the community in an honest way. We're not denying that issues exist. We never will do that. We're not denying that work needs to be done. But what we are doing is encouraging young Black men and women, racialized minorities to pursue. We have a scholarship program, as you probably came across in terms of your research, where we are investing in our community by providing scholarships to young Black and racialized students who are pursuing their studies in the criminal justice field.
Okay. So Jacqueline, let's lay the cards on the table here and talk specifically about, maybe it's a gut feeling that I have, and it's only a gut feeling that a woman of color can have. I'm not using any statistical evidence to back my statement, but I have done some research, and the findings might prove me to be correct. The Black community, or the communities of color, have the first and foremost biggest problem that we have when it comes to law enforcement is a lack of trust. So regardless of whether or not you are interacting with law enforcement as a member of the community or as an employee, that trust factor still exists. If your intention is to try to recruit more people of color to be representative of individuals within the law enforcement, there have been some very noticeable barriers that have been put in place that have prevented a number of them from even attempting to be a part of this community of law enforcement, such as, and maybe you can speak to some of them to see if some of them have been removed. You would know that more so than myself. But some of the barriers that have prevented people of color, Aboriginal and Black, are things such as having a Canadian citizenship requirement, height and weight restrictions or requirements, successful credit, background, and investigation checks, selection tests that were culturally biased, negative image, fear, and distrust. Of course, we talked about that. People's joining the police profession and services, they have a restrictive selection of pool engaged or engendered by the requirements of pre-employment, police technology training, and some employment criterias. Now, not saying that none of these are not valid concerns. We're not saying that none of them are valid concerns in order to be addressed before being accepted into a profession of law enforcement. But because the Black and community is so, these issues are so heavily weighted within those communities, it right away disproportionately reduces the amount of viable applicants that can come from these communities because of these barriers. Most of this results in human rights complaints most of the time, because individuals applying for these positions will feel as if that it's a human rights issue why they are not being selected for these positions. And public inquiries then have to take place and the pressure is put on. Can you speak to any of these barriers? Have any of them been removed, and or are people of color still facing these obstacles when attempting to join law enforcement services or any of these agencies?
Well, I mean, in terms of any human rights violations, we do not look at weight, height, age, those types of violations to human rights. If in fact anybody encounters that through the hiring process, you know, there is a process for folks to identify those kinds of things. In terms of suggesting that our people, Black folks, racialized folks are disadvantaged because they have to do criminal background checks, I think we have to be really mindful of those narratives.
I don't want to say criminal background. That wasn't one of them. That wasn't one of the reasons that they were being that was noted. It was things such as credit check. Like, what does a credit check have to do? Having a beacon score of 700 plus have to do with being a police officer? Does that play a role, do you think, in determining whether or not, you know, you can be a police officer if your credit rating is not up to par? What about the fact that
I can talk a little bit, Jacqueline, in terms of in the correctional field. So, I mean, if for example you're having some challenges financially, right? You become a little bit more vulnerable to you know, making certain decisions that you might not have made if you were in a different position. So you become somewhat susceptible, to being drawn in. You know what I mean? And again, maybe being vulnerable to doing things that you would not normally do. Right. So, you know, having any challenges around finances, you wouldn't want somebody who had some challenges around substance abuse or those kinds of issues. So, yes, we do need to screen for those things. You need to screen for them. Rarely have I ever seen in my industry, at least, where people would be automatically screened out. You need to find out who you are recruiting at times in order to put them in a more favorable position, right? For example, somebody asked me the other day, you know, if I have a criminal record, could I still be a correctional officer? And I said, in certain situations, yes, you can, but in certain situations, no, you cannot, right? It depends on what that crime was. It depends on whether or not you did, in fact, receive a pardon. There's so many things that are factored in the selection process. But yes, it absolutely matters in terms of you perhaps being vulnerable. Should you have some of those difficulties?
Okay.
So can I was going to keep quiet, but I'm going to 1-2 here with Jackie. So
Okay.
I think what's important, Jacqueline, and one of the things that we don't do well in criminal justice and in policing is explaining our processes. So
Okay.
you think about what poor credit could mean. So is it a pattern of late and irresponsible payments, right? And I'm going to give you responsibility. So what does that say about you as the individual, right? As Jackie also indicated, in terms of, does it make you more susceptible to potential corruption, right? In terms of where you are and having to deal with that. Then there's the reputation of the organization that you need to also be concerned with. But I think the other thing that we also need to look at is the whole issue of critical mass. all of us don't have credit problems. If more of us are applying, because you can see people are getting through, right? Then there's greater opportunity. And then even if that is an issue, then it becomes an issue of what I call competitive suitability. You're not the only one applying. So if you have a choice, you're running a company and you have certain criteria, and you have A that is just almost everything you want. B is some of the things you want, but there's something. Who are you going to take? You're going to take A. That is a reality as it relates to that, right? And then I just saw something flash up on there. The other piece around driving.
Yeah,
right? It's not just you're operating a government vehicle. The government also has to pay insurance. You don't get to sort of have a million speeding tickets, because once again, it speaks to who you are in terms of level of responsibility. And I'm talking objective.
David, so it seems like you're talking about a character evaluation.
No,
so
I'm not talking about
not a character evaluation at all.
Remember what I said. Remember what I said.
Okay.
Competitive suitability. So you
Okay.
have somebody, that's not character. Those are facts. A speeding ticket, bad credit, that's established, right? Because you can dig deeper. Once again, did you fall on bad times and had a problem? Or you overextended yourself and then didn't make payments, or you're playing hide and seek?
Okay.
Those are different issues. And then I say, okay, I look at you, Jacqueline, in terms of part of that competitive pool. If I need to pick between A and B, I'm going to pick A. Right?
Right.
So I'm not
saying, Jacqueline, if I could jump in, if you don't mind,
and not objective.
If I could jump in, please, Jacqueline. I think again, we really have to be mindful of some of the narratives that comes up when we're talking about hiring Black and other racialized minority. Do we ourselves automatically throw things, I didn't get hired because I'm a Black man or woman with a past, right? I think we have to be really, really careful of that. Everybody who applies could bring to the table some of these issues of concerns that needs to be looked at really, really carefully, right? In terms of us as persons of color, we know that we're always double and triply scrutinized, right? We know that we always have to be that much better than our non-Black counterparts. So the reason why, as an association, we have these conversations with people who are hiring, it's not to deter them, but it's for us as people of color, as racialized minority, to understand that when we take on these positions of trust and when we take on these positions of influence, we have to be very, very honest with who we are, where we've come from, and understand that these things will often be used against us very differently than our white counterparts, very, very differently. So to build on what Mr. Mitchell is saying is that, it does matter. It does matter if I have several hundred speeding tickets or 300. It does matter if I have had some choices that I've made. It does not automatically preclude you from pursuing a career in law enforcement, but it is important to know that it could affect you. And if it does affect you, it's not just because of the color of your skin. It's because of the issue that within your skin color you brought to the table. There are white people who also are subject to those very scrutinies and those very assessments and so on and so forth. We cannot, Jacqueline, and to the listeners and the participants, we cannot automatically suggest that there is a difference of treatment because of the color of our skin. Because when it actually happens, right, it takes away from our
The
voice.
validity of the argument. Absolutely.
It really does, Jacqueline. So I don't disagree with you, and I don't disagree with the importance of highlighting those concerns. And I don't disagree with us monitoring to ensure that there are not a disproportionate amount of cases where, as David said, when everything else is equal, right? We use things against a particular community of people to keep them out versus, assessing it to see whether or not it affects or impacts their ability to do the job. And that is what the system is supposed to be looking at. Will it affect you? So if you're not bondable, for example, you've done some things that deem you're not bondable. You can't work around money. Ain't nobody in no bank gonna hire you. Excuse me, right? But it's not because you're Black. It's because you're not bondable. So I think we have to be really careful when we are having these conversations to speak to the specific issues of concerns and not automatically make some assumptions. It's like Black on Black crime. That is a terminology that gets my blood boiling because there's no such thing in the criminal code. And when white people are shooting or hurting or killing, nobody talks about white on white crime. So again, Jacqueline, I think the narratives and how we engage in these conversations, our intent as an association of Black law enforcers is to ensure that the community has the understanding of the system and how we need to navigate in order to be successful. We have literally hundreds of Black and racialized officers who are working in these fields, who don't come from any history or those kind of labels that they put on our community and are doing just fine. Thank you very much is what we'd like to say. And again, my intent is not to defend the system, to suggest that those things don't happen. You have those mindsets. You have those people that think that way automatically. But the majority of who we are as Black law enforcers is not what those brandings of us.
And that's okay. I think what has happened just now, as a result of this discussion, as yourself and David have brought clarity to that question, because it needed to be asked, because there are a lot of assumptions within the community that these are the reasons why, and that they're very personal. And people are taking them in a very personal way. And now that you brought the clarity to it and you put context to it as well, and the scenario that you used, Jacqueline, which I thought was really, really powerful, was that in the event that something does eventually go down during the course of your career as a law enforcement officer or a member of corrections, your treatment in regards to the very same issue that you have, that your white counterpart has, could potentially be treated very differently just because of that. And it's eliminating these potential problems that can occur by you not kind of checking the boxes that ensures that you can't be compromised because of your financial situation. You're not easily compromised. You're not, into precarious situations that could lead you to you yourself committing some felonies. But
in any field, Jacqueline.
Hold on.
In any field, though, Jacqueline. In any field, whether you're a professor, whether you're whether you're in the medical field.
Right.
Any field that you're in, character, you're in an entrusted position.
This is what I was character matters, right? Yeah. Character matters. I'm with you guys. We needed to ask the tough questions. Okay, listen.
The culturally appropriate term is bandulu.
Okay, so Renu, we're gonna give you we're gonna give you the definition of bandulu before the show wraps up. Okay.
Oh, I'll give it to her. She knows me.
Okay, cool. So listen, We don't want to take up a whole bunch of time because we got Spider Jones waiting in the sidelines here. We need David to come back in very soon. But listen, Jacqueline, you talked about the hierarchy of positions within the correctional institutions, law enforcement divisions, and where we people of color fit in. And I couldn't be more concerned about that as well. There is a term called job ghettos. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's called David's got a list. It's called job ghettos. So even though we're getting in to these positions of authority, of power within the correctional institutions and law enforcement, we're placed in what they call job ghettos. So let me read you what I have been able to find that helps to define what a job ghetto is. So where law enforcement is concerned. So a job ghetto, law enforcement is well known. It's well known that most minority and Aboriginal officers, not to mention women, are still largely concentrated at the constable level, but that few are found at the higher levels of sergeants, detectives, lieutenants, inspectors, superintendents, or in more specialized, powerful, or prestigious sectors such as drug enforcement, organized crime, and internal affairs. So they're placed in what you call job ghettos. What is your take on this? And is there any truth to this?
I mean, based on your definition, I mean, I don't like the term at all, but based on your definitions, yes, you know, we used to call it the glass ceiling. It's been referred at times as the cement ceiling. You know, there's people up there. You hear the pitter patter of their feet up there, but there's no access to it, right? Or the glass ceiling where you see everybody up there and you're like, how the heck did they get up there? How can I get up there? So it's comparable to your definition of job ghettos. We aren't as represented beyond 1, 2, 3 entry levels or ranks. That has been a fight that ABLE has taken on for many, many years. I mean, the situation is such that when we can name, you know, whom are in those higher positions of authority by name, you know, you have a problem. Because if I was to ask someone else to name all the senior ranked white officers or white people within our professions, nobody could just go, you know, David, Jackie, Renu, Michelle. But if you ask us to name the senior Black officers, we can say Peter, Nish, David, Renu. So that is a problem. When we can still know these people by, and we know them within our association. We you know, you can say Stacy, you can say Ingrid. We just had the most senior Black officer, 30 plus years, retire. And coming behind her in that particular agency, there aren't many others up there ready and waiting to assume those executive positions. So, I mean, Jacqueline, what you're saying and what the community is bringing forward is also our cry, is really the message that I'd like to leave with you tonight. We're not denying that work needs to be done. We're not denying that there is disparities in terms of representation. We're actually...
But Jackie, can I just jump in real quickly here?
Yep.
So here's the big question.
Yep.
Why? Why are so many of us still centered, you know, in the positions of constables? And why are we still walking the beat? Why are we not behind the decision-making tables? Why are we not calling the shots? Why are we not navigating how the system should work for a group of individuals who overpopulate the system? Why, how, and when will we have our seat at the table?
The why, I would say, is that, as everybody's been saying, especially recently, is that there is systemic racism within our professions. That's your why, broadly speaking. How long is this going to continue? It'll continue as long as we do not, as David said earlier, become the massive. We have to keep increasing the numbers in terms of our overall representation in these professions, so that the more of us that there are, the more of us can then elevate one another. And in terms of the how, what we have to do is, when we are in those positions of authority, when we are hiring managers, just like our white counterparts do, hire our own. And I think that is part of the issue as well, is that there is this continued fear of reprisal, often, far too often, where when we look at inclusion, we look at it often. So when we're talking about Black, we also have to ensure that we include other communities, so that we don't seem as though we're exclusive of them, if you know what I mean. I think what we have to do is own the fact that we have issues, and what we need to do is to continue to call out. We mentor, we encourage one another to put our name forward for competitions, and we have to look within those competitive processes to see where the barriers to progress are and is, and work to remove them. I mean, if I had a magic wand, obviously, Jacqueline, I would wave it, but we live in a society that has systemic racism and other isms that are preventing the growth that we should see. I see Renu trying to jump in.
Yeah, Jacqueline's right. I think a lot of it is about being intentional and starting early. So are you identifying those potential leaders and providing them with the kind of support they need to advance and be successful in those positions? So are you identifying, as part of your succession plan for managers, directors, are you thinking about racialized staff, Indigenous staff, Black staff who have the potential? Are you hiring for potential as opposed to, first of all, like, there's a lot of very talented Black professionals in our profession, and racialized and Indigenous, but part of what we have to be more intentional about, and that's why that data collection is important, and that's being intentional about who are the people being selected for management training programs, who are the people being identified to succeed regional directors. I want to applaud David, because he, as a former regional director in Central Region in the division I now have responsibility for, was very intentional about developing leaders, Black and racialized leaders, to the point that 50% of the managers in Central Region are Black or racialized. And, it's that sort of important, deliberate action that, needs to be brave, needs to be, acknowledge historical inaction that we really need to do to help create a better, diverse, inclusive
thank you very much,
workforce.
Renu. And the thing that I will say before we're going to turn over to David now, because again, Spider Jones is here. We want to talk about the community, what it is to be Black in Canada. I think he's going to speak to that so very, very well. And of course, Mr. Richard Miller, the founder of Keep Six, will be joining in that conversation as well. But here's the thing. You have to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jacqueline, in order for these things to happen, we need individuals within these institutions, within these organizations, to be very deliberate in their appointments to positions of power. We need people that have the influence and potentially the power to do so, to be very deliberate. in selecting individuals from these racialized communities. And I think that's probably going to be, you know, the shortcut kind of thing that we're going to need, because the field of suitable applicants, as you very well noted earlier, David, is going to be wide. And it's going to be filled with many, many other people from various different other, sections of the society that don't necessarily look like you and I. So maybe we need individuals that are just going to be appointing people in a very deliberate way.
No, I think it's about being bold, and it's about the community holding, especially in public service, where whether it's policing, it's corrections, or the justice system in general, holding those people that are responsible for it to account. Because I can tell you, Renu, myself, and Jackie can change the system tomorrow. The system's not ready for that change. And I'll give you the example of what I'm talking about. So the current commissioner of the Buffalo Police Department is a personal friend of ours, Byron Lockwood. When he came on the police department in Buffalo, him and some other officers actually sued the Buffalo Police Department for discrimination, and talked about the lack of representation at the time. The federal court, and what a lot of people don't understand, when Americans sue, 90% of the time they sue for what they call injunctive relief, where the courts order that something happens. It's not always about money. As a result, if he won his lawsuit, the federal court ordered that his class of 150 people all Black, because they knew that would be the only way that this trickle thing wouldn't work, right? So Can you imagine tomorrow now, Renu or myself, so okay, the next 100 probation officers or 100 correctional officers or youth officers would be all Black? People would lose their minds.
Why not?
Right? Listen, I'm game. I'm strong that way. But it's not going to, because the community. I think the community has to support. I think the system's ready for it, but people have to submit it. I think we're ready. You've got the leaders that are there, but there's other things that are play. So let me just put that. The other piece that I also think is important when I talk about critical mass is what I call the urgency of now. Now, because of retirements, those spots are being vacated and the opportunities are available. If we are not deliberate, as Renu indicated, and bold to make sure that we are hiring for potential and representation, and that those folks then are competent at what they do, and those positions fill up with people who are of a particular age dynamic, that are young enough that they'll be there for a while, yet not old enough that they'll be retiring soon, we'll still be in this predicament 10 years later, because those people are now clogging up the system. So if we don't take those steps now, and if people, similar to what Keep Six and this group is doing now in terms of calling us to account, and even when I say that, call us to account, take a good look at who the government representatives are and the suntans that are here, right? There's other people that need to be called to account that we vote for or don't vote for, which is problematic, because then you get taken for granted, right? And also understand that there are allies and fair people out there that we also have to seek out, right? That are going to help to change that system. But it's just much more complex than saying that, we need to be deliberate, because there's that bold. So let Renu in the next, 4 people or 4 senior promotions promote South Asian women, and hear and see if I don't have to go down there with a cutlass to back her up, right? Because people are going to try and tear her apart, even though they may be the most qualified people. So it is not as simple as you say.
But David, what I'm saying to you is, what I believe in the heart of my hearts, and I hear what you're saying, because being a woman in a high-ranking decision-making position, I completely get you. I'm playing devil's advocate, guys. Okay, I'm trying to get you to talk about uncomfortable situations that people are thinking about, but not necessarily talking about. So people do want to know, why isn't somebody bold enough to make these very deliberate appointments, and let the crap hit the fan out all you want. Because
if I may, before you go, Dave,
person, so it's easy to say, not as easy to do.
But David,
you know what? But David,
Jacqueline, please, I need to answer that. it doesn't, it needs to matter. When I first got into the field, I used to say to people, you know, the hiring of of white women matter because most of the decision makers were married to white females, right? The Black and other racialized minorities don't matter as much as we need to matter. It should not be Renu, David, you, Spider, Mr. Miller, and I that say there's something wrong with this equation. When you walk into a boardroom, when you look at a snapshot of our political leaders or whomever, the community at large needs to be, and they do, and I can tell you in my industry, when you have offenders who will say, Miss, how comes you're only one of 4 Black women in this prison? Right? When we have the offenders asking those questions, the inmates asking those questions more often, we welcome that as Black and racialized law enforcement. Now, I always tell them, I'm not going to treat you any different because me and you look the same. We still have to hold you accountable. You understand me? So be careful what you ask for, because just because I'm the warden, don't mean you're going to get away with nonsense. In fact, I'm going to hold you to a higher accord because I want you to do much better. So Jacqueline, we appreciate you playing this devil's advocate. We do not find this tough. This conversation is not tough for either of us. I can assure you of that, because the Association of Black Law Enforcers have been having these conversations since the early 90s, and we will continue to challenge the system. We will continue to meet with the chiefs and the deputies and the solicitor generals and whomever just to ask the why. And we are ensuring to the best of our ability that those who are coming in the field do not feel alone, that they do feel that sense of the belonging. And how we're countering this, Jacqueline, is we're not waiting for a title or a position to be a source of influence. Because that's the other thing that we have to realize, is that whatever our rank is at the time, we are going to use that space to influence the change. Because if we sit down and wait until such time that we're deputy and chief and bakawashna and everything else, it's not going to work. So how we're countering it is that we are, when we are there, we are making and influencing change to the best of our ability, and we continuously strive. We continuously try to feed and get young people behind us that look like us, not to be deterred, not to say, well, listen, I'm not going to become a police because I'm not going to become it. We need to continue to create a critical mass because it will happen. It's been happening, but not at the pace we want it to happen, but it will happen. David,
thank you. Listen, we knew what we bit off when we brought this panel together. We have so many powerful people on this panel, and what we thought was an extremely long time, being 2 hours, seems like a drop in the bucket, because this conversation is so organic and go on forever and ever. But let's give David some more mic time right now, because I've got some really specific questions for you. Okay. Now, David,
very specific answers for you.
Yeah, I know. I bet you do too, don't you? So the Youth Justice Division is who you represent within the provincial Solicitor General's office. And no. Okay. So let me
I'll explain that, just so that, because some deliberate things have been done in order to purposely treat young people different than adults. So the Youth Justice Division is actually outside of that justice ministry, and is actually situated in the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services.
I see. Okay, thank you for the clarity. So I have you as the Assistant Deputy Minister. Am I correct?
That's correct.
That's the title. Okay, so now you operate within, or in consult with the Youth Justice Division, which provides policy direction, funds, and implements ministry programs for youth in or at risk of conflict with the law.
That's correct.
Including the operation of Ontario's secure custody detention facilities and probation offices for youth, as well as programs focused on prevention and diversion alternatives to custody and reintegration. Does that sum it up, David?
That's correct.
Okay, good stuff. So listen, let's jump right in here. So my take on this, of course, is that get them while they're young, okay? And that's the best time, in my personal opinion, to really affect positive change within our community. Get them while they're young. So you, David, could potentially be the key to a lot of our problems in the long term, because you play a hands-on role with the youth who are, disproportionately involved with law enforcement and incarceration, from our community. And I'd like to hear from you about the type of programs that your organization has implemented, is currently in the process of implementing, and what the results or the outcome has been to date from these particular processes.
So I think it's important to understand the system. There are several misunderstandings about the youth justice system. So I'm responsible for young people that are subject to the Youth Criminal Justice Act, and that's at 12 to 17 at time of offense. So the whole notion of young people is all mixed up. So, when you go into social services or the city or different things, you're seeing 12 to 24, 16 to 30. I think I saw something the other day to 35. So I deal with young people up to the age of 17 at the time of their offense. However, the complicator there is that when these folks actually are held accountable, go to the courts, they may be 18, 19, 20, 21. The other
Before
reality,
they actually go to trial? Is that what you're saying?
Well, so you commit, I'll give you the example now. So one of the big issues that we're facing now is violence. X gets shot today. They don't find Y, who shot him, until 2 years later. X was 17 when they shot him. He's now 19 when we find him and try him at 20, right? Because it goes back to the time, your age when the offense happened, not when they catch you. So now I have an older cohort of people in custody. The other issue or the other reality is, and it's interesting that you talked about disproportionality. Would you like to hazard a guess as to how many young Black men that I have in custody at any given time?
I am not going to even challenge that guess at all. I'm going to leave that to you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So the reason I said that is that since 2004, based on the principles of the youth criminal justice system, which focuses on prevention, early intervention, and least intrusive, we've had an 84% reduction in the numbers of young people coming into custody. So I can tell you today, I have approximately 700 beds across the province. We're only using 27% of them. I have 184 young people in custody today, and that's in a province where we have 14.7 million people, right? 184. Problem with that, in terms of that 184, is well over 50% look like those of us on the panel here, right? And that they're young men. The others are Indigenous on the other side. The reality is that as long as you are not involved in offenses of violence, there is a less likelihood for you to end up in a custodial setting. We have about 4,500 young people on probation being supervised in the community, where the focus is intensive case management in order to support law-abiding behavior and strengthening families. So when you say, my division was the first in Canada And I've got some really good people working with me. And I don't want to seem like a commercial, but we are doing some good things. But at the same time, we're also a microcosm of society and have issues, systemic issues in terms of systemic racism that needs to be dealt with, and we acknowledge that. But in terms of, so we were the first to collect race-based data. So we're collecting actual data on the social identity of the people that so are you a parent? Are you Black? Where are you from? What languages? What religions? For the purposes of addressing the whole disproportionate representation from a programmatic perspective, but even earlier. So one of the things that we're identifying is problems in the education system. And we all know about the, school to prison pipeline. What is it that we need to do to cut that off at an earlier stage? Because if you're in custody, that's the wrong time. That's actually not the best place for me to help you. And the most profound statement I ever heard was actually from Chief Saunders, Chief Mark Saunders, retired Chief Saunders of the Toronto Police, where he said that it's a sad day when a young person has to go to jail to learn a trade, right? Because we have trades programs. We're teaching them these things. Wrong place, wrong time. That needed to happen before you even came there. Or we have young people coming to us with very low credit or credit attainment not consistent with their age and where they should be at. And then, we're sending them to school in our facilities there. So the big ones, you want to talk about programs that are working, is education, the trades programs, the whole rites of passage type programs in terms of acknowledging their African Canadian heritage, acknowledging indigeneity, and working to reconnect them to their cultures and communities. The other things that my folks have been focusing on is parenting. There is 50% of the kids in the criminal justice system, once again, 12 to 17 at time of offense, are connected to child welfare, that they don't have parents that are actively involved in their lives. And so you can appreciate, and there's research today that says the one of the significant contributors to a successful young person is a responsible and caring adult. And that responsible and caring adult is supposed to be your parents or parent, right? So, we're working on some things in terms of how do we strengthen parenting from a prevention perspective before kids come to us, right? I've got probation officers sitting at what they call situation tables, where you have multiple social services, the police, education at a table saying, hey, David looks like he's on the wrong path. Is there anybody here that can provide support, right? Or programs that will sort of keep him centered before he becomes a criminal justice problem. Right. So in terms of that early intervention piece, those things are there. But lots of work to do, lots of misconceptions about the system, because I've heard it when I first took over. Somebody from the community, you have thousands of young Black boys locked up. The numbers of I've been the ADM there for 4 years. When I first started, we were at about 350 people, young men on a daily basis. We're down, like I said today, just before I came on and checked, 184 in custody. And this is sustained in terms of where we were in the early 2000s and 90s, where we were up around 4,000 kids or young people in custody across the province.
So, Mr. Mitchell, it appears that you're not sleeping at the switch at all. So
never have.
In the 4 years of your tenure, you can boast a dramatic reduction in the number of youth that are currently incarcerated within your facilities.
That's first of all, that's sustained reduction. And it's not just about me, it's the people. I've got some very smart policy people.
It's not just you,
and very good people that are making connections with the young people. But at the same time, we're not there yet. We have problems that we need to sort out.
Right. But what I'm saying about this is quantitative results. These are the type of quantitative results that we're asking for, that the community is asking for, individuals like me are asking for. This is what taxpayers want to know. They want to know what type of results are coming from the endless amounts of monies that are being pumped into the system in order to deal with these specific issues. And when you can deliver quantitative results like this, it is very, very heartwarming to know that, maybe we're going in the right direction. Now, who is responsible for chronicling the steps that you're taking, the process, so that we can make it maybe into a best practices for other types of institutions or.
Right now, I mean, Ontario is seen as a leader in Canada in the youth justice piece. So we have provinces coming to see what we're doing all the time. We've done some work with Renu's division in the adults to see, okay, in terms of what we're calling emerging adults, and those are the young people 18 to about 26, that chronologically they're at those numbers, but from a social maturity perspective, not quite there. Are there programs, are there approaches that we're using that may be better suited to addressing those needs and being able to provide the types of supports that will change people? But I also think that it's important from a community perspective for people to understand that in my mind, there are three elements to being able to change somebody. And that's the want and the need of the individual to change, the ability of the system to support that change, and then finally community acceptance. If any one of those three things are missing, it's not going to work. And right now we're having problems on the back end where, okay, we can't get people into housing. We can't get people jobs, right? Yeah. And so it's falling down there. We may not be always doing the right things at the right times in the right way to be able to support them and move them around. So it falls down there. And then sometimes people just aren't ready yet, right? In terms of, their contribution and their motivation in terms of wanting to change and to contribute to society from a legitimate perspective.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for the clarity there. David, I suspect that your name is one that we should watch over the years to come. And
what do you mean? Watch them fire me?
No, never. Jacqueline's on top of that. Don't you worry.
Oh, don't worry. Jackie and I are a team, so it's all right.
She's on top of that.
Sometimes you get blown away just because you speak the truth and I got to get into my thing too, because I was accused of the race card. We're ready for you. Playing the race card so many times in the media business.
We're ready for you right now. So, David, thank you so much for sharing. And once again, there will be a part 2, and hopefully maybe we'll see you next week as well. So the next panel is, we're going into our 4th and final segment right now, which is the community segment, what it means to be Black in Canada from a lay perspective, and being a member of the community, and who we're so honored to have a Canadian icon with us today in order to share his story and his experiences. And joining in on that will be the founder of Keep Six, Mr. Richard Miller, and anybody else who wants to share from a personal perspective as to what type of experiences that they've had. So let me just introduce the next lead, which is Mr. Spider Jones. Mr. Spider Jones is an award-winning journalist in both the music and boxing fields. Jones is a 3 times former Golden Glove champion and was inducted into the Canadian Boxing Hall of Fame in 1996. Spider was recently voted Boxing Commentator and MC of the Year by the Board of Governors for the World Boxing Federation. Spider is also a highly popular motivational speaker who is much admired for his diligent work amongst youth. His inspirational life story, Out of the Darkness, reveals his amazing rise from the impoverished, gang-infested inner city projects of Detroit and Windsor, and how, as a grade 5 dropout, he eventually returned to school at the age of 30 to become an honor student. Spider's favorite thing is talking to his Nighthawks, whether it be about sports, entertainment, or hot issues. Over the past 20 years, Spider has interviewed such notables as Muhammad Ali, Mark Wahlberg, Jesse Jackson, LL Cool J, Ron Howard, Scott Grimes, Doug Gilmore, just to name a few. Spider is also a member of the Muhammad Ali's training camp back in the days when the greatest fought Shaballo. So we just want to welcome Mr. Spider Jones to the platform And I'll say this before you jump in, Spider, and give us your account of your experiences. Spider, the world has since changed in many ways of recently. And some will say that it's never going to be the same again. We've heard the term driving while Black, etc. The Black experience when dealing with law enforcement in Canada versus the United States can, in many cases, be very different, but yet still the same. It's not a rhetorical question, so you can give a yes or no. George Floyd, 46-year-old African-American. Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old EMT from Louisville, Kentucky. And most recently, Jacob Blake, a 29-year-old shot 8 times in the back as he went to a car to open the door. My question to you is, based on your personal experience, your story that I'm hoping that you'll be able to share with us, do you think how much differently do your interactions with law enforcement change on the different side of the borders? So your interaction with law enforcement in the US versus your interaction with law enforcement in Canada, how much of a difference is there, if any, from your perspective?
Oh, there's a huge difference. I'm very comfortable here, but it's because I'm an older guy too. I'm a senior citizen. I don't have the same problems or issues that a lot of the young people of color do. But in the States, you got to be scared. You got to be very scared. You got to be frightened. I mean, my sisters and my relatives over there, I mean, they teach their children when they're young, very young, how to conduct yourself during a police stoppage. And if we see all of the things that go on in America in terms of police officers, and I listened to the speech last night, Vice President Pence talking about law and order and respecting it. How can you respect as a young Black person or like Hispanic or somebody of color, respect when all you do is fear over there for your lives and for the parents, how they fear for the children every time they leave the house now. But over here we live in what I call denial. White Canadians live in denial. They would tell you there isn't the race. We don't have systemic racism here, but it's very, very strong. And by the way, for my two friends there, David Mitchell and Jacqueline Edwards, I recall going into the Don jail and was asked to speak to the guards because there was a huge problem between the black correctional officers and the white ones, and it got bad. The papers were writing it up, and I went in and spoke with them, and I've been in all the institutions across this country many times, and the reason the systemic racism is there is because when I mean these people are still people. Whether they're a correctional officer, whether they're a social worker, whether what they are, they're a reflection of our society. And if you got a racist society, then you're going to have racist police officers, racist social workers. My dream from the time I was 10 years old was to work in the media. And I got to tell you, today, not much has changed. I became the first Black man to go coast to coast on the radio in this country, and that was 1994, not that long ago. But it is a reflection of our society too. There's very few people of color in radio. There's very few talk show hosts. There's nobody in the producers' rooms. People just don't. There's no vision. They lack the vision, and you have to have people in place that have vision. They want to see their own selves, a reflection of themselves, and you just don't see a lot of that in the media. As far as we have a chief of police in Ottawa now. Mr. Soley, Peter Soley, and we had Mr. Saunders here. Many people tell you we've come a long way, but I'm not. I disagree with that. We still got a hell of a long way to go as a black man in Canada, and I'm an old black man, but I still been fighting against systemic racism, denial for years, and accused so many times of playing the race card when in fact it's the reality card I'm playing. But they
Okay, thank you so much. So Spider, maybe you can help us to, walk a mile in your shoes, being a pioneer in the Black community
Geez, you make me feel old.
being
Go ahead.
a pioneer in the Black community. You've experienced a number of racial or racist. I had number of racist experiences firsthand. Can you share with us instances or scenarios?
When I started to pursue my radio career here, and I had so many rejections, and then they told me, you don't have an education, you got to go back to school. I went back to school and I still couldn't get a job, and I finally landed a gig in radio, and I remember walking up and down the halls, and although I had attained my childhood dream, when I looked at all the pictures and all the photographs on the wall, I didn't see any people of color at all. And I always felt alienated, I got to tell you. And a lot of that I kept to myself in terms of how I felt. But I spoke out a lot on the radio, and I had a lot of young people would come to me. People that are in the business, they would come to me and ask me if it was worth it, because they didn't see, this is when you have that kind of racism and you don't see a reflection of yourself in the career profession that you really want to pursue. Sometimes you just quit and walk away because nobody's embracing you in that. But I have to say this with David Mitchell here and Jacqueline again, because I believe in working with young people. We have a youth center up at Chalk Farm, the Spiders Web Youth Empowerment Center, 12 years up there now. And we begin at 7 years old to empower them with life skills and help them with their homework clubs and things to keep them so they don't become disillusioned. I had a learning disability and became disillusioned very young because I wasn't doing well. I didn't have a support system there to help me and say, okay, maybe you don't learn as quick as the next person, but you can get this. You got this. All you have. We need those kinds of things. And that's one reason I opened the center, because in the prisons I met, they're harder to deal with these young people because a lot of them are hardened criminals, and they've made $400 or $500 a day. They didn't want to go and work at Foot Locker for, minimum wage after that. You got to get them when they're young. And they really mistrust the police here. I see that all the time, and we're working on race relations, and there are a lot of good coppers out there. I don't mean that to insult, that are working on those race relations too. But there's a huge fight out there, and being black in Canada, maybe we like to point the finger and tell you it's all across the border, it's worse. And it is. There's a larger population, and racism there is just over. They just will tell you to your face what they think of you. Whereas here, they won't do it. You get rejected after rejection. You don't know why. A lot of times it's to do with color. The old boys club doesn't feel comfortable with they don't feel like we maybe we don't qualify. I was told once that I was denied a job. I went down to the final two, and the reason they didn't take me, a producer told me, and he said if I said this to anyone that he would deny it. But he told me in the boardroom they decided Canada wasn't ready for a black talk show host out west yet.
Wow.
And I was, it broke my heart. I thought it had to do with boxing, in which I knew a lot about, but I was denied that gig.
Well, Spider, and Richard, just see if you can just get ready to jump in here. We had a number of individuals that had wanted to join this last segment of the panel to talk about community interaction with law enforcement. and what their experiences have been. You can imagine the lineup of people that we had that wanted to talk about their personal experiences when it came to interacting with law enforcement. But we wanted you to speak from the perspective that you're an accomplished Black icon in the community. But what I'm hearing from you is that regardless of your accomplishments, your achievements, your experiences, that doesn't negate the fact that you're still a Black man and that you went through those experiences regardless of your socioeconomic situation, regardless of your education, regardless of the postal code that you now carry or that you carried as you were climbing the ladder, to say, racism was still prevalent in your life. And this is what many of us don't seem to understand, is that it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when you leave your office, whether it's on the 54th floor of Canadian Place, or you're leaving, the police station as a sergeant and you're going into your layman's clothes, when you change into a lay person, you're just another Black person.
Yeah.
You're just another Black person, and that the interaction that you have with law enforcement just as a Black person is very much different, regardless of your position in life, than that of a person of a Caucasian. So, Richard, if you can talk to us specifically about the situations that you have encountered yourself. Richard is the founder of Keep Six, and share with us your experiences when dealing with law enforcement, please.
Thank you, Jackie. But I think one of the most important things we have to look at is, Spider brought up a very important terminology, the old boys club. And David is someone who's been around for a very long time, and he's quite aware of it. And I think one of the factors we have to take in place, and this goes to especially David and Jackie, there is a certain individuals that has built that plateau within the system over years. And you have those individuals who have that mentality and carry that mentality and pass it on. And it's still up to this day that's in the system. So I'll speak on one terminology for instance. And David, this is one of your own colleagues that you were with for many, many years. And years back, I was in an incident where a CO used the word, the N-word. And I personally wrote a letter to the minister's office. And then I wrote a letter to the superintendent. And about a few days later, they had a group of a social worker came to do grievance counseling for this. But at the end of the day, up to this day, there's never been a sense of apology from any level of government. But that one of your own colleagues from years back, who was in position at the time, he called and had a conversation with me. He says his exact word was that, I want you to drop this issue, because if you don't drop this issue now, it's going to be very difficult for you later on down the road. And I asked him a very important question. I says, you've been in the position that you're in. Why would you not address this issue and bring it to a stage for changes? And his reply back to me was that, I am at retirement. I want my package. I'm not here to disturb the whole foundation. So it goes back to say that we are all here together and speaking about these issues, but there's still that mentality of the individual that's in position, and they condole these things that are happening. You see? So one of the things we have to stop and look at is how we are able to move forward. But most of all, the changes that we're able to put in place for the future generation. And that is.
And I think, if I may, Mr. Miller, you're under, I think maybe, you know, I don't know if you're going to get here, but you yourself is a leader. You yourself have stepped out and stepped up for many, and is modeling behavior that I believe is positively impacting the lives of many young Black men, where you are encouraging them not to become what society brands them to be. You know, you're trying to work with the system, even though it is broken, even though there are areas within it that need complete overhaul. But I think that, you know, when you are looking to support young Black men who perhaps have had a stay inside a penitentiary and are looking to support them in terms of employment, in terms of trades, I think those things we also need to talk about. I think it's important to identify what is not working, but let's also try to share with people what is working. And to your credit, and one of the reasons why I answered your call, this is my, I think, third time you've reached out and I've answered your call, is because I think you are doing something extremely positive. And and for me, Jacqueline, it underscores that it's not about the position you might have. Now, there's positions of influence that we need to be at because you have the pen to strike the change that is required. But Mr. Miller, to your credit, and to the credit of what Keep Six is doing, you are putting the pressure. You do know how to put pen to paper. And whilst you might not have gotten that apology or that response, know that you need to continue to write. You need to continue to encourage people to call a wrong. And you need to continue to know that there are folks like myself, like a David Mitchell, and others within the system that agree that the system requires change, and align yourselves with us and continue to reach out to us and continue to tell us these stories and continue to encourage people to write to the parliamentarians, continue to encourage people to speak truth to it, but also encourage them to do what they can within the environment
Never give
until
up.
the
I like
environment changes. So
Yeah.
I know, but I thought it was important for me to say that to you, Richard, so that you are encouraged, because I can only imagine some days the heaviness and the weight that you must feel in this struggle. But press on, keep going, and know that there's many of us in uniform with badges that absolutely understand what it is that you're saying, and absolutely know that what you're saying is true, and that we are in our own ways working within this very system to bring about the change that you feel is falling on deaf ears. So I needed you to hear that, because I think it's important for others to also jump in and support you and support what it is that Keep Six is trying to achieve, so that you do not feel that you are alone in the struggle. And so kudos to you, Richard, in what you're doing. I speak about you behind you all the time. I think that you are a force to be reckoned with. And I think that you will realize some of the goals that you are aiming at. Honestly, I do.
Thank you. That's awesome, Jacqueline. Thank you so much. And I echo those sentiments exactly. Spider, this question is coming back to you. Listen, you have seen many changes occur over the years, and you're no longer the first. You might be the first, but you're no longer the only person of color, specifically Black, that has now been on radio across the country. There's others that have followed in your footsteps as a result of your willingness to turn a blind eye to racism and push on with your hopes, dreams, and aspirations to become who you are today. So we want to thank you for not doing exactly what Jacqueline just talked about, and which is giving up. Because you paved the way for so many others, as you will see in part 2 of these discussions next week. We're going to have one of your cohorts, which is Michael Williams. If everybody remembers him, you know, the VJ, if not the first VJ for Much Music so many, many years ago. So there's so many great things that you've done, but let me ask you specifically. Do you believe that in the time that you have been a force now, a media figure, that you have seen change happen in the manner that you would like to see it happen for the Black community? Have you seen some positive outcomes as a result of your efforts of individuals like yourself, Jacqueline Edwards, the David Mitchells, our former chief of police? Have you seen the change that you've been looking for starting to occur?
You implying to the media or to the
overall in the system, with the overall, you know?
Yeah, I've seen changes. I mean, it was wonderful to see Chief Saunders become the first Black chief in the history of the city. A wonderful man who visited my center quite a few times. I'm glad that Peter slowly got his job. I see on Bay Street is slowly changing. When I first started going on Bay Street to hustle money for my youth center, the only thing Black down there was when I went to the press conferences and covered them, the only thing Black was the puck. I mean, that's the truth. And people would look at me like I was an alien. I got to tell you, now we see people like Dwight Drummond. We see Christine Juggernaut. We see people that are they're what is the word I'm looking for? They are in the media, but we still have a long way to go in terms of Black producers, Black talk show hosts that can speak their opinion, share it with other people. You, as an anchor person, you're not allowed to do that. You read a teleprompter. And it's good because young Black people still see a reflection of themselves when people like Dwight Drummond, who worked his way up from Jane, and he grew up Jane and Finch. This guy was a cameraman. He worked his way up. He had some very difficult experiences, but he got there. And I'd like to think that I was a role model because I always had time to embrace people of color, but not just people of color, anyone who wanted to, anyone that wanted to further their career, always open for advice. But I would leave you with this. In terms of the media, we're talking both electronic and printed media. We are sorely lacking in representation. We just don't have it, and we need it. The media is one of the oldest institutions in this country, but I think they're still, and I've said this before, the old boys club runs it, and they just don't seem to be able to. So you only get one side of everything. We need people with different perspectives in the media, people that have grown up in poverty, police brutality, grown up in racism, to share what it's like to be a Black person and what it can do to you, racism can do to you, your psychologically, things like that. And so we've still got a long way to go. We're on the right track, but we got a long, long way to go.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And Mr. Miller, we want to be able to close out the show. Of course, we're going to ask everyone to give a call to action, because everybody within this panel represents an organization that has a fantastic, plays a very, very important role and has a high level of responsibilities as far as what they need to deliver to the Black community. So I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to put out their call to action specific to their organization or the institution in which they represent. But Mr. Miller, if you can just speak to us this evening about this part one of this two-part event, and any of the Keep Six goals or objectives that you feel either have been met tonight or are still in the works, where part two may be concerned.
Thank you very much. One of the things that I'm really just like to say thank you to everybody who attended the panel today. I have had the pleasure of having Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Edwards on previous panel with Keep Six before, and I just want to say thank you. But one of the things that I'm focused at the present time is about education in the community and the trades. That's something that Keep Six is very, very focused on right now. Getting young people and adults into the trade industry. I myself work in the trade industry, and one of the things that I find that if a person is busy and able to make a sustainable income and contribute back to society, they feel good about themselves and able to stay out of the system, right? And that's one of the main focus. As for the panel tonight, part two is going to continue because this is a very big discussion. We're looking forward to having Michael Williams.
Jordana as well. So we want to acknowledge that we had Jordana Goldlist as should have been here as well, but and she was here, but unfortunately we didn't get to her in part one. I apologize if she's there.
Yeah, and also we have a Officer Dwayne, who's a Black officer with 52 Division, and he's going to be coming on the panel, and we're hoping to even have a psychiatrist to address the mental aspect of it all for an individual who wants to go through the system. So this will be a continue on, for next week, Thursday. And also would like to ask out for donations. We are at Keep Six. We don't receive any grants. We do everything with myself and whatever the community is able to help us. So we appreciate your donation, and whatever you're able to donate, we do appreciate. Just go to Keep Six, KEEP, the number 6, IX.org, and donate whatever you're able to help us to continue our work that we're doing in the community. We're also going to be having, one of the things that Keep Six did was, because of the COVID-19 and what's been taking place and everything else, we've decided to do a song for the community. Next week, Thursday, we are going to be doing a press release for that song, Together We Stand, and we would love for you to join us for that moment. We had about 14 musicians throughout the city of Toronto came aboard for this collaboration with Keep Six and so forth. So stay tuned and don't be late. 7 p.m. September 3rd, and live on our YouTube and our Facebook page.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'll just say one thing about the trades that Keep Six promotes and assists young people, young and adults as well, into getting into. I really think I think I'm starting to see the fruits of your labor and the fruits of many other individuals like yourselves' labor, because I've been driving by construction sites of late, because where I am, there's a lot of construction going on, a lot of new home condos are going up like crazy. And it warms my heart every single time I drive past one of these sites and I see the Black guys with the boots, man, and the hat, and I see them out there, and they're not just one. There's not just the one Black guy. There's like a ton of them. There's a half a dozen, and it warms my heart. It really, really does, because when I was growing up as a little girl here, those jobs are off limits. Construction jobs, trades jobs like that, they were off limits to people of color. You just didn't see it happen, and now we're seeing more and more of them involved. So whatever you're doing to help the community get into good paying jobs like that, Mr. Miller, keep doing it. Keep doing it. Okay? And we're going to turn it over to Jacqueline Edwards. Jacqueline, give us your call to action, please, as we sign off tonight. Of course, grossly over time, but I apologize.
I will keep it very, first of all, just thank you. Call to action is to, let's keep the pressure on, let's keep the conversations, and let's make sure that we go from recognition to actual strategic plans for change. I think that, we have to go beyond words and make sure that there are planned actions on how we're going to eradicate racism from all the different industries, systems, environments within
Awesome.
Canada.
Good stuff. Thank you so much for that. And Mr. Mitchell, Mr. David Mitchell, give a call to action for us, for the viewers tonight.
I'll just echo what Jackie said, and I just wanted to, there was a question in the chat, and with respect to what we would offer to a young person interested in pursuing a career in criminal justice or law enforcement, go on the ABLE website, contact us, and we'll find you a mentor. These jobs from our perspective are about the economic piece, but more importantly, or just as importantly, is the social justice aspect of it in terms of who's now making decisions, who understands the impact of those decisions, and how do you make things fair, safe, and equitable for everybody. So thank you and good night.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Spider, can you tell us about the organization that you run one more time, and how individuals can get involved with that organization for youth?
Well, first of all, let me just say very quickly that I believe that silence is the same as violence. You have to step up to the plate. And we need, I've always told the young people that I deal with this, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. You have to sacrifice, everybody. And I tell young people that in prison, I tell them wherever I go, you have to sacrifice. We teach people that at Believe to Achieve, which is the organization that supports the Spiders Web Youth Empowerment Center. And you can reach me anytime at spiderjones@rogers.com. And we work with young people to focus on the skilled trades, on education, and keep them on the right track. And that's important that you get them when they're young.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And once again, I just want to thank all the viewers, the listeners tonight for tuning in to this awesome Keep Six event. Thank the organizer himself, Mr. Richard Miller, founder of Keep Six. And I want to thank all the sponsors, as well as GBKM TV. We want to give a big shout out to the president of GBKM TV, Mr. Kenny Bass, who's keeping it real for the grassroots media, Afro-Caribbean community. And I also want to thank each and every one of you that tune into the Ordinary People Show. So if you're looking to hear or see more of Jacqueline Dixon, check me out on GBKM TV on Saturdays on www.gbkmtv.com. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.